A 10-year-old girl was dragged out of her house by her stepfather on New Year's Eve, amidst shouts and the cold stares of neighbors. It seemed like everything would end, as it always had. But this time, a luxury car stopped. A billionaire stepped out and said, "Enough." And everything began to change from that one sentence. The wind howled through the old roof tiles. The entire neighborhood lay still, as if holding its breath, awaiting the New Year's Eve fireworks that no one seemed to anticipate with joy. Suddenly, the door of house number 17 burst open. A dry, cracking sound, as if someone had kicked the lock, and then a small figure was dragged roughly onto the porch. "You little piece of garbage! I told you not to touch that cabinet," Travis roared, his hand clamped tightly around Ellie's wrist. The thin girl, 10 years old, had a torn sleeve on her woolen sweater and bare feet inside worn-out sneakers, the soles so thin you could see the insoles. Each time he yanked, her body lurched forward, slamming against the cold, steel-like brick. "Let me go," Ellie whispered, but her voice was as faint as a breath lost in the wind. No one heard. Or perhaps they didn't want to. The curtain in the house across the street twitched slightly. A pair of eyes glinted behind the glass. Then, all was dark again. No one opened their door. Ellie bit her lip. She had only wanted to find Dad's mailbox. An old wooden box hidden under the bottom drawer. The only thing her father had said before he died. "When you miss me too much, you can read the letters in there." But Travis, her new stepfather, had screamed as if she'd touched his treasure. "I feed and clothe you, and you go digging through that garbage." He pulled her so hard, she fell heavily onto the cold brick. Her cheek scraped against the ground, her lip split and bled. But what hurt her heart wasn't the physical wound. It was the absolute silence of the entire neighborhood. Nancy stood frozen in front of the house, her hand gripping the peeling paint of the door. Her eyes met Ellie's for only a second, full of pleading, full of fear, then looked down. She didn't step forward, didn't speak, didn't do anything. Her shadow wavered in the pale yellow light, like a ghost of someone who used to be a mother, but was now just an empty shell, useless, silent, and too pained to speak. Travis whirled around to face Nancy, his eyes blazing. "What are you standing there for? Do you want to go out on the street with this ungrateful brat? Do you want both of you out on the street?" Nancy flinched, taking a half step back, as if slapped by his gaze. Her hand tightened on the door until her knuckles were white, but she didn't dare open her mouth. Not a word of defense could she utter. She only bowed her head, as if she herself had been dragged out of a well of courage that had long run dry. Until... The headlights swept across the scene. Travis didn't even finish his sentence. A powerful beam of light shone directly on him and Ellie. The entire space seemed torn apart. A sleek, black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb, its engine as quiet as the breath of a tamed beast. The car door opened. A man stepped out. A long, charcoal grey coat, collar turned up. Expensive Italian leather shoes gliding lightly on the road. A stern face, salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed. Eyes that seemed to see right through you in a single glance. Ethan Whitaker, the head of the largest investment group in the state, a quiet but powerful billionaire, entered the scene as if it were a board meeting, and someone would pay the price for their mistakes. He stood in the street, shining his headlights directly at Travis. His voice was deep, not loud, but chilling. "Enough." His voice was deep, decisive, like metal striking concrete. Travis froze, looking up. He squinted at the stranger. "Who are you? This is none of your business. Get lost." Ethan didn't move. He raised his phone. "I am Ethan Whitaker. If you don't know my name, I suggest you be quiet. I'm recording, and I have an entire team of lawyers who love cases like this. His voice was cold, colder than the wind, so cold that Travis released Ellie's wrist, as if electrocuted. Nancy cowered. Travis swallowed hard. For the first time in his life, he met someone who didn't need to shout to make him feel pushed back. Ellie crumpled to her knees, sitting on the ground. Her eyes looked up at the strange man, the first person who dared to speak up for her. Travis scoffed. "Who do you think you are, trying to be a hero? Why are you sticking your nose into other people's business? I'm just a stranger helping a poor girl being abused by her own family." He took a step forward, enough for the light from the headlights to illuminate his stern face, his neatly trimmed graying hair. "And I have enough evidence to send you to court." Travis looked around. The curtains were still drawn, but he knew. From now on, there was a witness. There was a name, a person who wouldn't be silent. "This little brat is disrespectful, doesn't appreciate who's raising her," he said. But his voice was less aggressive. Ethan glanced down at Ellie. She was still sitting there, holding a small wooden box close to her chest like a treasure. He bent down, speaking gently. "Are you all right?" Ellie nodded slightly, her eyes red-rimmed. "I wasn't stealing. I just wanted to look at the letters in my memory box," Travis hissed. "She's just pretending to be pitiful. Her mother taught her well." Ethan stood up. His face hardened. "You can repeat that to the police." Travis cursed, then turned abruptly and went into the house, slamming the door shut. A second later, all the lights in his house went out. He didn't dare come out again. Ethan turned back, opening the car door. "What's your name?" "Why was your father hitting you like that?" he asked, not really waiting for an answer. Ellie clutched the wooden box. "I'm Ellie. He's not my real father. My father is gone. Since I was 8. The wind blew harder, carrying the pungent smell of New Year's Eve fireworks from somewhere in the distance. But here, there was no laughter, no lights, only a little girl sitting in the beam of the headlights, like a stray streak of paint in a grey picture. Ethan looked at the torn shoes on her feet, the soles worn out, the toes ripped open, revealing torn socks. "Get in the car," he said, his voice not an invitation. Ellie hesitated. "I don't know who you are." "Good. You should be suspicious at first. It's a sign of a survivor." He opened the passenger door. "But you also need to learn to distinguish who deserves to be trusted." Ellie didn't answer, but she looked into his eyes. It wasn't the eyes of a kind man. It was the eyes of someone who had seen much injustice and was tired of being silent. She got into the car, holding the box in her arms, her hands trembling not from the cold. Ethan closed the car door. He didn't ask anything more. The car rolled away from the neighborhood. Behind them, house number 17 faded into darkness, like a black hole that had just swallowed all the painful years Ellie had called home. Some nights, just one person standing up is enough to change a child's life. The road to the edge of town was deserted, only the headlights illuminating the silent trees on both sides like ghostly sentinels. When the automatic iron gate opened, before Ellie was a white-painted mansion, tall, silent, and almost cold. Ethan turned off the engine. He didn't say anything when he got out of the car. Ellie didn't ask. She got out, still clutching the wooden box and the worn brown teddy bear named Pickle, the only thing left in the world from her 7th birthday, before her world fell apart. Ethan pushed the door open, turning on the lights. Soft yellow light spilled onto the polished wooden floor, sweeping across a spacious living room with high ceilings, a classic fireplace, bookshelves lining the walls, and an emptiness that couldn't be hidden beneath the grandeur. No TV sounds, no one calling anyone. The house was so luxurious it felt alien, as if no one lived there, only objects remained to wait for memories. "Come in," Ethan said, his voice even. Ellie stepped lightly, almost afraid to put her feet on the floor. Each step, as if afraid to defile this place. He led her to a small room next to the staircase, a secondary living room once converted into a children's bedroom. Not colorful, but there was a clean single bed, a small wardrobe, and a few old stuffed animals placed on a high shelf. Ethan pointed to the neatly folded pajamas on the bed. "Old clothes of Eleanor. My daughter. Take a bath. The bathroom is on the left. There's hot water. There's soap. Just use it." Ellie looked up at him. "You can take the teddy bear with you if you want." She nodded, not speaking, her hand still holding the bear, as if afraid someone would snatch it away. The bathroom was filled with warm steam. The mirror fogged up. Ellie stood still for a moment before the running water, unaccustomed to the feeling of not having to keep time, not having to compete with anyone to shower first. The warm water flowed down, washing away the dirt and something that had hardened inside her for the past year. She sat down in the tub, hugging Pickle wrapped in a towel, and just breathed. It had been a long time since she had been able to breathe without fear. When Ellie came out, hair wet, pajamas long covering her knees, Ethan was in the kitchen. The kitchen was large, modern, but not the display type. There was the smell of fried onions, the smell of simmering broth, the kind of smell that reminded people of home. Ethan didn't look at her when he spoke. Knowing how to cook soup is a survival skill. Warms the stomach, easy to swallow, and most importantly, cures many unnamed things. Ellie stood at the kitchen door, not stepping in. She hugged Pickle, her hand gripping the bear's frayed ear. "Are you vegetarian?" Ethan asked. She shook her head. "Any allergies?" he asked again. "No." "Then eat. There are two kinds of hunger in the world, stomach hunger and heart hunger. The second takes longer to cure, but we'll start with the easier one." Ellie stepped in, sitting in the wooden chair next to the dining table. The chair was high, her feet didn't touch the ground. She felt small, lost, but safe. The bowl of soup was placed in front of her. Steam blurred her eyes. Chicken soup, carrots, potatoes, coriander. Just a normal bowl of soup, but so fragrant that her stomach really rumbled. Ethan poured more water, then sat opposite her. Ellie took the first spoonful, then the second. No one spoke. Only the sound of the spoon touching the rim of the bowl. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't have to eat while looking around warily. 15 minutes later, the bowl was clean. Ellie didn't ask for more, but she put her hands around Pickle, hugging him tight to her chest, as if the bear had just eaten with her. Ethan observed, without speaking. His eyes fell on the unbuttoned button of Pickle. Then he looked up at the little girl. Big brown eyes. A little lost, but trying not to look weak. "Do you always hug it?" he asked. Ellie nodded. "It's called Pickle," she said softly. "My dad gave it to me on my 7th birthday. Mum said Dad had to borrow money from a friend because he lost his job." Ethan was silent, his hand placed on the table, the wood grain faintly imprinted on his thin hand. "I kept it carefully, even though Travis used to say he would throw it away if I didn't behave myself." Something flashed across Ethan's eyes, very quickly, but Ellie caught it. She was used to looking at the faces of adults. She knew it wasn't pity. It was anger being held back. He stood up, going to sit on the sofa, each movement steady, neat. Ellie watched, feeling inexplicably at peace. Ellie went to sit next to Ethan, still hugging Pickle, her eyes looking around the quiet house. After a moment, she hesitated and turned to ask, "Uncle Ethan, why don't I see your daughter here?" Ethan paused slightly. His eyes left the cup of cocoa he was holding, looking towards the hallway leading to the second floor, where a door was always closed. He replied slowly, "She is in a very far place." Ellie nodded slightly, then whispered, "Like my dad." Mom also said Dad is in a very far place. Ethan was silent. He didn't correct the words, didn't deny it, just nodded slightly, then gently stroked the little girl's head. A silent stroke, like an acknowledgement that they had just shared a kind of loss that adults and children understood in their own way. Ellie squeezed Pickle in her arms, then looked up at him, her eyes bright, but not hiding the sadness that still lay at the bottom. "Do you miss your daughter? Like I miss my dad?" Ethan looked at the little girl. The question was not complicated, but it went straight to the deepest part of a father who had lost a child. He nodded, his voice soft, clear as a promise. "I always miss her, Ellie. Every day. Even the days I try not to think about it." Ellie didn't say anything more, leaning her head against the back of the chair. "People still think I would be heartbroken to talk about her. But actually, what hurts more is when no one dares to mention her anymore." Ellie nodded. She understood. Not all pain needs to be hidden. She looked around. The house was big, clean, beautiful, but lacking music, lacking laughter, lacking even the sound of calling each other every morning. Like the years after Dad died, her mother often sat blankly looking at the photo. The furniture was still there, but no one was really living. Ethan took a blanket, giving it to her. "Your bed is in the guest room, at the end of the hallway on the second floor. It will be cold tonight." Ellie hugged the blanket, walking towards the stairs. When she got to the door, she turned back. "Can I let Pickle lie next to me?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. Put it where you feel safest." That night, in the small room under the attic, Ellie placed Pickle next to her pillow. Her hand unconsciously touched the unbuttoned button. After a moment, she took a small piece of thread from her pocket, sewing the button back on with slow, clumsy stitches, but carefully. Outside, Ethan was still sitting in the living room, the light from the fireplace reflecting on his worn face. On the table, he placed a framed picture. The brown-haired girl, bright eyes, Eleanor. And in Ellie's eyes, he had seen again something he thought was lost. Not the similarity in features, but the way both hugged an old item, as if it were the last thread holding them to the person who loved them unconditionally. Sometimes, the first thing that heals is not medicine, but a hot bowl of soup, and a seat that no one takes away. Dawn crept stealthily through the thin curtain, drawing pale orange streaks on the smooth wooden floor. Outside the window, the back garden was still covered in mist, sparrows chirping on the white fence, the first sound of the new day. Ethan had been awake for a long time. He wasn't a sleeper. In the early morning kitchen, the smell of warm milk and cocoa mixed with the smell of freshly baked toast. The table was set with only 2 ceramic cups, one large, one small. Ellie came out, hair loose, eyes still swollen after a long night. Pajamas long almost to her ankles, hands hugging Pickle as always. She stopped at the threshold, hesitantly looking towards the kitchen, then turning to Ethan, her voice very small. Can I have some water?" Ethan paused slightly, then without saying anything, just walked over, took another cup, filled it with cool water, and placed it on the table, waving her to come and sit down. "Here, you don't need to ask permission to drink water." His voice was deep, even, but his eyes were full of tenderness. Ellie took it, holding the cup carefully with both hands, as if afraid to break it. She nodded in thanks, her eyes downcast. In a place called safe, the habit of fear had not yet disappeared. "Here's your breakfast." Ethan gently pushed the plate of toast towards the chair across the table. "Do you want sweet or light cocoa?" Ellie shook her head, muttering, "Whatever is fine." "Then start with just right." He dropped 2 spoons of cocoa, 1 spoon of sugar, stirred well, then pushed the cup over. His eyes still not leaving the opened newspaper, but the next question made Ellie look up sharply. Has anyone ever told you that you deserve to be loved? Not the kind of question asked for the sake of it, nor with a tone of pity. The sentence fell out as if Ethan was just thinking out loud, but it hit the deepest part of Ellie, where she had been trampled on with phrases like, burden, you're worthless. The little girl didn't answer, just nodded slightly, and tears, very quietly, began to roll down her cheeks. No sobs, no lamentations, only a gasp, her hands squeezing Pickle tighter as if afraid of being seen as weak. Ethan folded the newspaper. He didn't say, don't cry, nor did he say, everything will be okay. Instead, he stood up, took a tissue, and placed it next to the cocoa cup. Crying is also an action, and sometimes it's the bravest action. After breakfast, Ethan went upstairs. The study was neat, not cluttered with documents, but everything was within reach. He dialed a familiar number. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. Thomas, Ethan here. New Year's Day, you're calling early. Something must be up. The man's voice on the other end was both sleepy and alert, the type of a lawyer with many years of experience. Ethan didn't beat around the bush. Last night, I brought a little girl home, dragged by her stepfather in the middle of the street, right in front of me. A pause. Then Thomas asked, his voice lowered. How old is she? 12. Any injuries? Not serious, but mentally, clearly been traumatized for a long time. Is there a video? Yes. Enough to open a file. Ethan was silent for a beat, then added, I need you to contact Child Protective Services. Open an investigation into a man named Travis, legal stepfather. The girl's mother seems to be dependent on him, and her father is dead. No one to protect her. Thomas sighed. Full name? Address? Travis M. Garner. Lives at house number 17, Cedar Hill neighborhood, east of town. Okay, I'll take care of the initial paperwork. But Ethan, what? Are you sure you want to get involved in this? You know, once the file is opened, Travis will be dragged to court. You may have to testify. Ethan looked out the window. Ellie was sitting on the steps, the early sunlight shining on her messy hair. She was holding Pickle, not playing, just holding tight. Do you remember my Eleanor? Ethan asked. Thomas was silent. She used to have the exact same look in her eyes, as if the whole world had no one standing on her side. His voice lowered, as if touching a layer of memory that had been buried deep. I can't go back and save Eleanor, but this time, I can do the right thing. Thomas didn't say anything more. After a moment, he replied, I'll call the social worker today. Ethan walked down the steps, carrying a small wooden box. Inside was a little sewing kit. Give Pickle here. I'll fix the button. Ellie recoiled slightly, as a reflex. Then she slowly placed the teddy bear in his hand, as if handing over a part of her soul. Ethan sat down on the stone bench, silently sewing. Each stitch straight, sure, like him, not saying much, but when he did something, no one did it better. Do you know how to sew? Yes. Eleanor used to have a teddy bear named Poppy. She fell into a ditch all wet. I sewed her arm back on all evening. Ellie was silent. After a moment, she asked softly, Eleanor, has it been long since she passed away? Ethan didn't look at her, his hand still sewing, his voice even. 4 years. I'm sorry. It's okay. People only really die when no one mentions them anymore. Ellie nodded. She didn't know what else to say. But she remembered the last time she had someone sit quietly next to her, just to sew back on a thing she loved, was when she was 8 years old. That day, Her mother sewed back the broken strap of her school bag. Dad sat next to her, telling the story of the singing bat. It was also the day Dad coughed so hard that he fainted in the kitchen, and after that, he never told stories again. When Ethan finished sewing, Pickle had his lost button back. The thread was a little off, but sure. Ellie hugged the bear to her chest, her lips pressed tight. "Thank you." Ethan stood up, dusting off his hands. "Pickle is stronger now. He'll last a few more years." Ellie smiled. For the first time, a real smile. Not distorted, not forced. Ethan looked at her, not because of the smile, but because in those eyes, a small spark flickered. Faint, fragile, but the beginning of hope. He didn't ask anything more. Ellie didn't tell anything more. They both understood. There were questions without answers, and there were pains that didn't need words to be healed. Not every child needs someone to tell them they love them, but every child needs someone who doesn't leave them behind. The small meeting room of the Child Protective Services Center was in an old building. The white painted walls faded, the hallway cold and empty. Fluorescent lights shone evenly down on the long wooden table in the middle of the room, where 4 people sat facing each other. No one sitting close to anyone. Travis leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Light blue shirt tucked in neatly, hair stiff with hairspray, looking no different from a model husband. Only his eyes, glancing sideways, glaring, didn't hide the impatience. Nancy, Ellie's biological mother, sat next to him, her hand shaking slightly, her eyes swollen. She avoided Ethan's gaze and didn't dare look at Travis. Ethan sat up straight, his expression calm, but his eyes as sharp as knives. Next to him was Thomas, neat in a grey suit, his leather briefcase open with a few printouts, and a USB drive placed in the center of the table. The social worker spoke first, her voice neutral. "We invited everyone here today to clarify serious allegations regarding child abuse." Travis laughed scoffingly. "Abuse? I was just teaching her a lesson. She's disrespectful. She digs up forbidden things in the house. Discipline is a father's right." Ethan didn't say anything. He nodded slightly, signaling to Thomas. The lawyer pressed a button. The small screen at the head of the table lit up. The video Ethan recorded from his phone appeared. The image of that evening, Travis dragging Ellie out of the street, cursing, yanking her wrist. His voice rang clear. "You little piece of garbage." The angle was clear, the sound undeniable. Nancy put her hand over her mouth. Travis still tried to maintain his composure, but his face began to turn pale. "Is this the discipline you mentioned?" Thomas asked, his voice calm. "Just a little hot-tempered." The child was injured. Neighbors confirmed hearing screams almost every night. One person reported seeing the child sneaking out at midnight, without a coat. Thomas opened his briefcase, took out a file, and placed it on the table with a decisive movement. "And this is Ellie's academic record, or rather, completely empty." He pushed the file towards the social worker. "She's 10 years old, but for the past 3 years, her name hasn't been in any regular school. No elementary school record. No application for temporary leave, no medical reports, nothing at all." Travis leaned forward, his voice sharp. "She's sickly. She often complains of being tired and doesn't want to go to school. I can't force her." Thomas didn't blink, speaking evenly. "You didn't take her to the doctor, didn't ask for a medical exemption, didn't hire a tutor, but still left her at home, without schooling, without anyone to control her. That's not caring. That's neglect." "Ms. Nancy," the social worker spoke up, "did you know about these things?" Nancy swallowed. She looked at Thomas, then at Ethan, then quickly glanced at Travis. Finally, she sighed, weakly. I just wanted to keep a roof over our heads. I don't know how to protect my child. I don't know what to do." Ethan placed his hand on the table, his voice cutting in like a knife. Silence in the face of violence is also a form of complicity. Nancy blinked, as if slapped, but she didn't react. Perhaps she also knew Ethan was right. Travis jumped up, his voice louder. "You people don't live in my house. You don't know how disrespectful Ellie is. She's rude. She makes things up." "Are you saying the neighbors are making it up?" Thomas asked. "I'm saying they don't like me from the start." "So, this video is also staged?" Ethan asked, his voice as cold as frost, showering down on a cowardly flame. Travis didn't answer. His face flushed. "Ms. Ellie is temporarily being cared for in a stable environment," the social worker continued. "We will open a full investigation. Ms. Nancy, as the biological mother, you have the right to cooperate. But if you continue to live with Mr. Travis, your custody will be temporarily suspended." Nancy looked up, looking straight for the first time. "Is Ellie okay?" Ethan answered instead. "Better than when she was living under your roof." The room was silent, only the sound of the heater humming softly. After a long beat, Nancy whispered, "I'm sorry." No one answered. When the meeting ended, Travis walked away quickly, not shaking hands with anyone. Nancy walked slowly behind, her high heels tapping weakly on the tile floor. Ethan and Thomas went to the parking lot. "Do you believe her?" Thomas asked. Ethan shook his head. "I don't care if she's telling the truth or is afraid of being sued. I only care about where Ellie will live, and if she's safe." Thomas nodded. "I'll suggest an emergency appeal, asking for temporary guardianship for you. This case is strong. Video, witnesses, neighbors, plus Travis's poor attitude of cooperation." Ethan was silent for a moment, then asked softly, "Do you think I'm overdoing it?" Thomas laughed. "Overdoing it? Ethan, you just pulled a child out of violence in the middle of New Year's Eve, gave her a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. If that's overdoing it, then this world needs more people overdoing it. Like you." Ethan smiled slightly, but in his eyes there was still something heavy. Not doubt, but the sadness of someone who had lost, and now was determined not to lose again. That afternoon, when Ethan got home, Ellie was sitting reading a picture book in the living room, Pickle lying snugly in her lap. The little girl looked up, her eyes questioning. "Uncle Ethan, where did you go?" He hung his coat on the hook. "Attended a meeting." "Is it related to me?" Ethan sat down in the chair opposite. He looked straight into the little girl's eyes. "Yes, I'm not lying, but everything I do is to protect you. No one has the right to hurt you, Ellie." The little girl was silent. After a moment, she whispered, I don't know if I deserve to be protected." Ethan didn't refute. He only said, "People don't need to deserve to be safe. They need to be safe to believe that they deserve it. It's easy to blame the abuser, but don't forget to blame the silent, because silence has covered up the beatings that are never told." That weekend morning, the sun was thin as paper, shining quietly on the bare branches in the back garden. The small room next to the kitchen was cleaned up by Ethan into a study corner, a wooden table, a whiteboard hanging on the wall, and a few new-colored pencils still in their packaging. Ellie sat on the chair, her hands hugging Pickle, her eyes as tense as a guitar string. Teacher Martha arrived on time, an old woman with white hair, a small figure, wearing beaded glasses, a cream-colored sweater. Her smile had something that made people feel at peace, like a warm blanket washed and folded neatly in the closet. "You're Ellie, right?" Martha said, sitting down next to the little girl. "I'm Martha. From now on, we'll meet every morning for a while, just to have fun. Nothing scary. Ellie nodded, not taking her eyes off the bear. You don't need to worry about anything, Martha smiled. Just sit here. I'll take care of the rest. Ethan watched from afar, standing in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. He didn't interfere, but he was there. When Martha held up the picture book, the little girl only looked, her eyes scanning each letter as if it were something foreign. Martha gently placed her hand on Ellie's notebook. Do you know how to write the name of your bear, friend? Ellie looked up, nodded slightly. She took the pen, her hand shaking slightly. The scrawled letters gradually appeared. P-I-C-K-L. After writing, she put down the pen and cried. Not sobbing, not complaining, only tears falling on the paper, blurring the last letter E. Martha didn't say anything. She took a tissue, handing it over gently. Ethan stood outside, squeezing the cup until his knuckles turned white. That evening, Martha sat down to drink tea with Ethan. This little girl is strangely intelligent, she said, her voice as light as reading an old poem. But there's a layer of ice around her heart. Ethan nodded. I see. Not because of a lack of ability, but because she's afraid of being wrong, afraid of writing wrong, reading wrong, then being scolded, being yelled at, being abandoned. She hasn't been to school since the 2nd grade, Ethan said softly. Her stepfather didn't let her go to school. Yet she still knows how to write Pickle's name. Martha smiled. You know, the name of the thing people love most is always the first thing we learn to write. That's how people learn to live, with feelings, not theories. Ethan put down his teacup, silent for a moment. How long do you think it will take for Ellie to catch up with her peers? I don't know, Martha shrugged, but I think she won't need to catch up with anyone. She will go at her own pace, and who knows, go further than everyone else. Ethan looked out the window. In the living room, Ellie was sitting diligently coloring a picture, Pickle standing between 2 large hands. One of those hands surely was his. The 7th day of that week, Martha taught Ellie how to write a complete sentence. What do you want to write? She asked. Ellie thought for a moment, then wrote, Pickle likes this house. Martha nodded. Very good. But what about you? Ellie hesitated. Then she added the 2nd line. Me too. But I'm afraid I won't be here anymore. Martha placed her hand on her shoulder. You know, a real home is not in brick walls or windows. It's in the people who don't abandon you when you're wrong, when you're sad, or when you're not good at anything. Ellie didn't speak. But that day, for the first time, she cleaned up her books after class, folded the notebook, wiped the board, and arranged the colored pencils in the right order in the box. Those seemingly small things, to Ethan, were more precious than a perfect score. That night, Ethan reopened the video of Ellie writing her first letter. He stored it separately, naming it Day 1, Starting to Learn to Live. He knew Ellie was not only relearning the letters, but was relearning how to trust. Trust that she no longer had to dodge blows, not to guess the faces of adults, not to be silent when she had something to ask. He had lost a daughter because he didn't realize those things in time. This time, he didn't allow himself to back down. The first letter that a child writes is never just a letter. It is proof that the child is living, remembering, loving, and learning how to be a person. Late in the evening, the wind slammed against the window panes, carrying the thick cold of the impending snow. In Ethan's 2nd-floor study, the soft yellow light reflected on the old frames, the faces that were gone but never forgotten. Thomas poured 2 small glasses of whiskey, placing one in front of his friend. "Are you sure you want to talk about that today?" he asked, his voice low. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked down at the glass, his eyes as if sinking into the darkness behind the glass. Eleanor died when she was 9, he said, his voice hoarse, each word as if cutting into his throat. A car accident. On the way home from school. Thomas nodded. He had heard about the accident. Everyone in town knew, but no one had ever heard Ethan tell the details. She was sitting in the back seat, fastened the seatbelt. The other car ran a red light. Ethan stopped for a beat. His hand clenched the glass tightly. After that, I sold the car, cleaned up her room, folded each shirt, each doll, then put them all in a box. I thought doing that would make me feel better. But it didn't. Thomas was silent. No one interrupted the pain that was flowing. I miss her every day. I miss her so much. I don't dare to be near children. I don't dare to look into their eyes. Another pause. Then he said, as if just breathing out after 10 years of holding his breath, until Ellie appeared. Downstairs, Ellie was playing with Pickle in the living room. She used colored pencils to draw more eyes, a nose, and a red bow on paper, sticking it on the bear's back. Like a passport, she said. Ethan said Pickle would need papers if he wanted to go to school with her later. The little girl smiled slightly, Pickle sitting snugly in her lap, wrapped in a small handkerchief that Ethan gave her the day before. But when Ellie reached for the scented candle placed next to the fireplace, her arm bumped into Pickle's leg. The light bump made the teddy bear roll and fall into the fireplace. The fire was low, but still hot enough. Fabric caught fire faster than she could scream. "Pickle!" Ellie shouted, rushing over, but Ethan had seen it from the stairs. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. Just rushed over, opened the fireplace door, and used his bare hand to snatch Pickle out of the fire. A sizzle rang out. His hand touched the fire, burning. Ethan didn't scream. He threw the teddy bear on the floor, using a cloth to stomp out the embers, then breathed out, his hand pulling back, red and swollen. Ellie froze. She looked at him. Then she looked at his hand, looked at Pickle, scorched on one ear, but intact. Then she burst into tears, not like the times before, sobbing, holding back. This time, she cried out loud, as if the tears suppressed for years had finally found a way out. Ethan knelt down, putting his remaining hand gently on her shoulder. Ellie rushed into his arms. Her whole body trembled. "No one has ever done that for me," she sobbed, her voice broken. "No one, ever." Ethan held her in his arms. He didn't say anything, because all words of comfort were superfluous at this moment. 10 minutes later, Ellie had stopped crying. Ethan wrapped a bandage around his hand, not crying out in pain, even though the burn was deep red. Thomas came down from upstairs, seeing that scene. He didn't say anything, just stood for a moment, then quietly left. Ethan sat down on the sofa, Ellie still leaning on him. Pickle lay between them, one ear scorched, but still recognizable, like Ellie herself. Ethan said softly, as if whispering into the air, "Not everyone is a father when they have a child, and not everyone needs blood to do the right thing." Ellie looked up, her eyes swollen. "I'm sorry. I burned Pickle. I hurt you." Ethan smiled softly. "It's okay. Pickle will tell this story to all the other bears. He will be respected." The little girl giggled through her tears. For the first time in many days, that laughter was no longer forced. That night, Ethan changed the bandage on his hand, then sat alone at his desk. He took out his notebook, the one he had long only used to record promises to himself, and wrote, "I couldn't save Eleanor, but today I saved Pickle, and if the little girl believes that her teddy bear deserves to be saved, then perhaps, finally, she is also starting to believe she deserves it." A father doesn't have to be the one who gives birth to the child, just the one who is willing to reach out when the child is lost, and not afraid of burning when saving what the child loves most. It was raining from early morning, the grey raindrops clinging to the glass, each drop stretching as if wanting to erase the outside world. Ethan's mansion became unusually quiet. No birds, no sun, only the smell of waffle baking faintly in the kitchen and the ticking of a spoon against a cocoa cup. Ethan received the letter from Nancy at noon. A crumpled envelope, the handwriting slanting, "To Mr. Ethan, please don't let the little girl read it if you think it will hurt her more." He read in silence. The letter was short, not flowery, not apologetic. "I don't have the right to call myself a mother. I know. But every night, I wake up with the sound of my child crying in my head. I only know how to be afraid. Afraid of being left behind. Afraid of not having a home. Afraid of Travis going crazy. I chose to be silent. And I was wrong. If you allow, please let me say once, to the little girl herself, that she has never been a burden. It's just that I was too weak." Ethan folded the letter, putting it in the drawer. He didn't tell Ellie right away, just watched the little girl sitting learning with Martha, her hand writing each letter carefully, her mouth pressed tight for fear of spelling mistakes. 1 week later, late in the afternoon, the rain still hadn't stopped. The iron gate rang out a light creak. A knock on the door rang out, 3 times, then silence. Ethan looked outside. On the stone steps, a woman stood shivering in the heavy rain. Nancy, hair tangled and wet, old coat covered in mud, no umbrella, and eyes red and swollen from crying too long. Ellie heard the sound from upstairs. She hid behind the window curtain, just enough to look down at the porch. When she saw the familiar face, she froze, her hand hugging Pickle tightly, her feet trembling. Nancy was still standing there, her hands clenched tightly. "My child," her voice was hoarse, breaking in the rain. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was afraid. But no one is more important than you. No one at all." With each word that rang out, the rain seemed to pour down harder. Ellie slid her back against the wall, her hand covering her mouth. Not fear. It was the old memories flooding back. The last time her mother left her in the dark room, closing the door to let Travis vent his anger. Ethan didn't say anything. He just stood beside her, his eyes not exactly angry, but absolutely not lenient. Nancy looked up, meeting that gaze. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to let the little girl hear me say it once." Ethan looked up the stairs. Ellie was standing there, eyes wet, bare feet. He walked closer to her, speaking softly. "You don't need to decide right away. No one is forcing you to say anything." The little girl didn't answer, her eyes still fixed on her mother, the person who used to be the only safe place, then also the one who made her lose faith in the word family. "You can forgive," Ethan continued, his voice even, warm. "But you are not required to forget." After a long time, Ellie walked down. She didn't run, nor did she say anything, just went to the cabinet, took out a clean towel. She opened the door, not inviting her in, nor hugging her, just handing the towel to her mother. Nancy took it, her hand shaking. "Thank you, Con." Ellie nodded slightly, her eyes still wary, but in them there was no longer hatred. She turned back into the house, closing the door, not slamming it shut, but decisive. That night, Ethan sat with Ellie on the sofa by the fireplace. He didn't ask her how she felt, just poured cocoa and gave her another cookie. "Do you think my mother is really sorry?" she asked, her eyes watching the dancing flames. "I'm not sure," Ethan said honestly, "but I know one thing. The person who really isn't sorry won't come knocking in the rain." don't hate my mother. It's just, I don't trust her like before." "That's good enough," he smiled softly. "Forgiveness is not about trusting again. Forgiveness is about being able to breathe again, without carrying the anger." Ellie nodded. After a moment, she took a pen, opened her notebook, and wrote a line. "Mum was wrong, but I don't want to hate her." Ethan read it. He didn't comment, but he stood up, opened the drawer, taking out the old letter. "Your mother once sent this. I think now is the right time for you to read it." Ellie took the letter, her hand trembling slightly. She opened it slowly, reading each line. Reaching the end, she paused. Her eyes filled with tears. She said, "I'm not a burden." Ethan nodded. "Because that's the truth." That night, for the first time, Ellie let Pickle lie on the chair next to her, not hugging him when she slept. She rolled over, pulled the blanket up high, then sighed with relief. Not because everything was okay, but because she knew, this time, she had the right to decide who would stay in her life. Some doors need to be closed to protect, but there are also times when opening a crack, not because the person outside deserves it, but because the person inside is strong enough not to be afraid of being hurt. Spring air. The atmosphere was less cold, but the courthouse still covered with a special layer of gloom, not from the weather, but from the stories buried under the carpet, now being dragged into the light. The rows of seats in the courtroom were packed, silent, as if holding their breath, everyone waiting for the moment the child spoke. Ethan sat in the front row, Thomas beside him, his notebook open, ready. In front of them was Travis, his face no longer with the arrogance he usually had, but tense, red-faced. He wore a white shirt, crooked tie, his eyes glancing around as if looking for an escape. The door opened. Ellie walked in, her hair neatly tied, wearing a light blue dress Martha had just given her. She hugged Pickle, but when she got close to the witness stand, she gently placed the teddy bear on the seat, standing up straight. The judge looked down, his voice deep but gentle. "What's your name?" "Ellie Garner." Her voice was small but clear. "Can you tell us what happened on the night of December 31st? She nodded, a deep breath, then spoke. "He dragged me like dragging a broken doll. My hand was scratched. My knee hit the brick. I didn't cry because I knew if I cried, no one would defend me." The whole room was silent. Ethan tilted his head, clenching his hand into a fist. Ellie continued, her voice even, not trembling. "I just wanted to find my dad's mailbox. Mum used to say when I missed Dad, I could read them again. But Uncle Travis called me ungrateful, garbage. I don't understand why adults hate me so much." A sharp intake of breath from the back row. Someone was holding back tears. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Ellie. You can sit down," Thomas signaled. An employee took Ellie back to her seat next to Ethan. He gave her a small glass of water. She took it with both hands. The trial continued. Travis stood up, his voice sharp. "She's lying. I don't hate her. I teach her a lesson. You people don't know how rude she is." The judge looked at him, his eyes not blinking. "Do you have anything to prove your words?" Travis rolled his eyes. I didn't record a video, but I just yelled. Didn't hit her. She's imagining too much." Thomas turned on the screen. The USB drive was plugged into the laptop. The large screen in front of the court appeared, the image of Travis dragging Ellie roughly out. The cursing was clear. A neighbor witness stepped up to the stand. An old woman with white hair, her hand shaking, but her voice sure. "We heard crying many times, but no one dared to intervene. We were cowardly. And now, I'm ashamed. But That was real. The second person was a student, a friend of the old woman's daughter, confirmed that she had seen Ellie sneaking out at night, cowering under the eaves of a neighbor's house just to avoid being scolded. Travis couldn't say anything. His face red, he retreated to his chair. The judge closed the file. Not needing the second day of trial, his eyes looked straight at Travis. Based on video evidence, direct witnesses and the victim's testimony, the court concludes that the defendant, Travis M. Garner, is guilty of child abuse and neglect, serious level. Punishment, 5 years in prison. No parole for the first 3 years. The sound of the gavel echoed like the judgment of an old winter just closed. Ellie sat quietly beside Ethan. She didn't cheer, didn't laugh, nor cried, just looked down at her hand. Her hand was holding pickle lightly, and whispered, "It's over, isn't it, Uncle?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, where the first spring sunlight of the year had just shone on the steps. Number its beginning. That afternoon they returned home. Martha had prepared butter cookies. The whole house smelled of cinnamon. Ellie sat down at the table, took out paper, and wrote. On the white paper, she wrote, "The first day without fear." Ethan passed by, glancing at that line. He nodded, not saying anything, but his hand quietly placed on the little girl's shoulder. A light squeeze, steady, enough for her to know. No one would drag her away anymore. No more. Some trials not only judge the wrongdoer, but are also where a child stands up straight and proves that she has survived, even though no one thought she was strong enough to do it. Late spring, the lake surface rippled, the thin sun falling through the trees like gold threads sewing back the old season. In the mansion by the lake, the wind gently swayed the curtains of the attic floor, where there was a room that Ethan had never opened for many years. Eleanor's room, not locked, but always closed, not dusty, but deserted. A place Ethan kept as a part of the memory he didn't dare face, for fear that if he touched it, the loss would explode. This afternoon, he walked up the stairs, slowly. Ellie followed, not asking anything, just quietly carrying a dust cloth and a mixture of curiosity and caution. Ethan pushed open the door. The room was still the same as before, a bedspread with light purple flowers, a small desk by the window with a glass jar full of colored pencils, a bookshelf placed close to the wall, neatly arranged with the fairy tales Eleanor used to love. No dust, no cobwebs, only the silence of time and the soft breathing of two people standing together. "You can take a book," Ethan said, his voice soft, as if afraid to wake something up. "Eleanor won't mind." Ellie nodded. She walked to the bookshelf, running her hand over each spine, stopping at a thin book, the cover worn. "Matilda." "I've heard about this story," she said. "The girl is good at reading and uses her intelligence to fight against bad adults." Ethan nodded, smiling softly. Eleanor liked it the most. Ellie hugged the book, walked back to the bed, sitting down. Not jumping up, not joking around, just gently, as if knowing this place used to be a world of someone very important. "Uncle Ethan." She looked up, her voice soft. "If your daughter was still alive, would I have a place in your heart?" The question fell into the quiet room like a pebble dropped into the lake. Ripples spreading far, not colorful, but deep to the bottom. Ethan walked over, sitting down next to her. He didn't answer right away, just looked straight into the little girl's eyes. The eyes that used to be scared, used to be skeptical, now knew how to trust, knew how to ask, and knew how to hope for something lasting. "You've been in there already, Ellie," he said, slowly and surely. "From day one." Ellie bit her lip. Her eyes were shiny with tears, but she didn't cry. She smiled. A smile that wasn't loud, not brilliant, but was a sign of a heart that had stopped being afraid of being abandoned. That night, Ethan sat in his study. He opened his laptop, putting his hand on the keyboard. In front of him was a blank page with the title he had just typed, Enough, When I Decided to Intervene, Memoir. Not to be published, not to take credit. Just a way for Ethan to rewrite the part of the memory that he had been too long afraid to touch. He wrote, I used to think enough was when I couldn't take it anymore. But now I know, sometimes enough is when I can't continue to ignore it. It's when a child stands in the rain, being dragged like a broken doll, and the world turns away. I couldn't save my daughter, but I can save Ellie, and in that action, I also saved the part of the father that was still alive in me. He typed on, non-stop. The blank pages appeared with letters, and the past, thought to be immutable, began to be rewritten, not by forgetting, but by choosing courage to face it. Ellie sat in the kitchen, turning each page of the Matilda book, mumbling to read. She read slowly, but surely, each word round, no longer hesitant. Martha once said, "Some children don't need to learn fast. They just need someone to believe that they can learn." Now Ellie wasn't just learning to read, she was learning to rewrite her own story. The next day, she submitted an assignment for class. Write about someone who has changed your life. The essay wasn't long, but were the truest lines she had ever written. Uncle Ethan is not my biological father, but is the first person to stand between me and fear. When I fall, he doesn't tell me to stand up myself. He reaches out his hand, then waits until I want to take it. Maybe that's how true fathers love, not because of blood, but because they choose not to leave. She didn't need a high score for this essay, because the person she wrote about had read it from before, not with his eyes, but with his actions every day. Memories cannot be erased, but the past can be rewritten if there is someone brave enough to write with us. New Year's Eve came again, this year snow falling lightly like feathers touching the frozen lake. The yellow lights of the dining room of the mansion reflected through the glass, casting a warm light in the cold grey sky, like a candle lit in the silent months. Inside the house, the fireplace was burning softly. The smell of cocoa and baked goods mingled together, spreading throughout the room. 3 people sat around the hand-woven wool rug. Pickle, the worn teddy bear, was sewn back with red thread, lying obediently in Ellie's lap, next to the old wooden mailbox, now used to hold thank you cards that the little girl made herself throughout the week. Nancy sat near the window, holding a glass of ginger tea, her hair cut short, her eyes no longer red and swollen as a year ago. She didn't say much, just silently listened, learning how to be present without causing harm. Ethan poured hot cocoa for each person. He used his remaining hand to adjust the family photo of the 3 people taken earlier that month, the wooden frame placed solemnly on the fireplace mantel. When he turned around, Ellie had taken out a piece of paper, the handwriting even, beautiful and serious. It was a thank you letter she wrote for tonight. "Can I read it?" she asked, her eyes looking at Ethan. He nodded, sitting down in his familiar armchair, the cup of cocoa in his hand still steaming. Ellie stood up, her hand holding the edge of the paper lightly. She read, each word clear. "1 year ago, I stood in the middle of the winter night, not knowing where I would go, and no one knew who I was. A stranger stopped his car, recorded a video, threatened to call the police. And I thought, maybe this is the last person who will see me as a child, not a burden. Now, I'm called by name in class, get to hear happy birthday wishes, get to be hugged when I'm scared. I no longer have to write letters to Dad to hope to be saved. Because you did that. You didn't save a little girl, you saved my whole world." The room was silent after the ending. Ethan put down his cocoa cup, his hands clasped together, his head bowed low. Nancy put her hand over her mouth, trying to stop the sobs. Ellie walked closer, gently placing the letter on the table, then sitting down next to him, her hand gently placed on his hand, the hand that had been burned to save Pickle, now healed, only a faint pink mark as a gentle reminder of a fateful night. "Do you know what?" she whispered. "That day I didn't cry because of the pain, but because for the first time, someone stopped." Ethan squeezed her hand lightly. Then he looked into her eyes, the eyes that were now no longer afraid, but full of confidence, shining the light of a child who knew she was loved, chosen, and was allowed to stay. "I also have to thank you," he said, "because you gave me a chance to love again." The clock struck 5 minutes to 12. 3 people stood up, walking out onto the porch. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear, only a light wind and the sound of someone playing music from a house far away. Ethan put a coat on Ellie, slowly standing next to her, his eyes looking up at the sky. Nancy stepped out behind, holding a scarf, her eyes looking at her daughter, not daring to get too close, but also not leaving. And then, the first firecracker exploded. A burst of light bloomed in the night sky, red, then gold, then turquoise. The firecrackers seemed to redraw the sky that had covered Ellie's darkness for so many years. The little girl looked up, smiling. "Last New Year's Eve," she said, "I stood alone. This year, I stand between 2 people." Ethan put his hand around her shoulder lightly. "And next year, you will stand even stronger, whether there is anyone beside you or not." Ellie nodded. She turned to Nancy, hesitating for a beat, then reached out her hand. Nancy took it, not saying anything, just smiling shakily, as if someone had just been forgiven when they no longer dared to ask for forgiveness. Fireworks continued to bloom, the rays of light falling on the lake like pieces of memory being reborn. And in that moment, they were no longer 3 separate people, but a family, not needing the same blood, not needing to be the same, just needing to have chosen to stay, when all that was left were the broken pieces. People don't get to choose where they are born, but everyone can choose where they belong if there is someone brave enough not to leave when they are at their weakest. This story is not only about an abandoned little girl and a man who stopped his car, but also a reminder that sometimes just one person daring to stand up is enough to change a child's life. Have you ever met anyone like Ellie? Have you ever felt helpless in the face of something wrong, then regretted forever for not speaking up? If so, please share. I really want to hear your story. Thank you for accompanying us to the end of the story. Wishing you a peaceful evening.